Hey everyone, I'm Weh Yoeh, and this is the Entrepreneurial Clinician podcast. So welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneurial Clinician. I am your host, Weh Yoeh, and today we are taking the word entrepreneurial for a spin because we have learned that entrepreneurial means money, it means lifestyle engagement, it means I can work from anywhere in the world, it means I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. But the reality is entrepreneurial thinking allows us to do good in this world and create so many new opportunities for people who may not have had them. And that's why Weh is with us today. So Weh, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you are in the world. What made you say yes when I said, can you come on this podcast?
Well, the what made me say yes is the easy part, because Joe has been a wonderful supporter of both myself and the charity work that we've been doing in Cambodia for the last 10 years, Joe. 10-year anniversary in July this year. And that's how we met. So Joe and I met when I was looking to do some fundraising, and Joe has been really supportive ever since then. My background is a physio. I do consider myself a failed physio and a recovering physio. So definitely can identify with allied health professionals who feel a little bit burnt out, maybe a little bit tired of the day-to-day. However, I haven't done physio for about 2 decades. And so most of my work has been working in the nonprofit and in the social enterprise space. And I worked in Cambodia for 5 years. I lived there and started a charity called OIC Cambodia. And what that's doing is setting up the profession of speech therapy because there are none in the whole country. And then since I've been back now on the 5.5-year anniversary of working on Umbo. Umbo is a social enterprise. We're for profit, for purpose. And what we do is we do online speech and occupational therapy predominantly for rural Australia.
Yeah, so did you hear that, everybody? Weh is what he calls a recovering physiotherapist, but he has taken the discipline of speech therapy or speech pathology to an entire country that didn't even know it existed because he saw the need there. Then he comes back to Australia and goes, why are our people in rural and remote Australia still struggling to receive assistance? So he goes, oh, let me go create something to fill that gap. Yeah. So this is going to be a great conversation. So Weh, what made you decide that you needed to be a recovering or non-practicing physio?
I mean, I think it's really interesting that we, by and large, choose professions when we are not yet fully formed humans, and I still don't consider myself fully formed, but certainly at the age of 17, really with no idea about what I wanted to do. And I knew that I wanted to do something health related, but I knew it wasn't medicine because I'd seen my older brother go through that whole process and was very turned off by that. And then I thought, oh, well, I like sport and physiotherapy is involved in sport. And then, of course, I ended up working in aged care for most of my career of 2 years with geriatrics and people recovering from stroke and so on as well, and people with dementia and all sorts of interesting conditions, but not exactly the glamour that I thought I was going to experience in my physio career. One of the things I struggled with in physio is just the impact that I could have. I really wanted to see if I could do something to impact many people. And that's not to underplay or to, criticize the impact that a physio can have. I still think that allied health professionals have enormous impact in terms of depth. But I'm the kind of person who's more interested, I guess, in the systems and the bigger picture stuff. And that's why looking at how charities and how social enterprises can provide impact and why there are huge gaps in certain areas like Cambodia, like rural Australia, that's been more interesting to me.
Ah, fantastic. I love it. And now you have the opportunity to talk to people about what it was that took you from this clinician practicing physio with this big dream and asking these uncomfortable questions like, why is there no speech therapy in Cambodia? Or why are people in rural and remote Australia still unable to access occupational therapy? And then for you, you've been able to engage your entrepreneurial thinking around, well, how do we fill these gaps? Because it's very easy for somebody to come from a charity background and just stick their hand out all the time. Like I think at one stage you and I called it glorified begging. You just stick your hand out all the time. But you came up with some pretty innovative ways to raise funds. Can we just talk about that for OIC in a moment? Because I just want to help people understand the impact that you can have and the creativity you can have. So what are some of the interesting ways you did fundraising for Cambodia?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of born out of necessity, really. If you think about it, on the scheme of things that people are willing to give money to and to donate to in Australia, speech therapy, kids with disabilities in Cambodia is not exactly number one. So we sort of know where the typical areas people are interested in are, and certainly that wasn't one of them. So one of the best ideas we came up with was Day Without Speech, which we've still been running now for, I think, about 8 years. And what we do is we get kids mostly in school to give up talking for a big part of the day. They're younger kids that are, let's say, 4 years old. I believe some have done 45 minutes without talking, which is impressive. And some of the older kids that are, let's say, in year 5 or year 6, they're doing the whole day. And then they experience what it's like to not be able to communicate the way they're used to. They raise money for Cambodia, and we come in and do a bit of a debrief to help them process what they've experienced and also why they're so lucky. And one of the most interesting things about this has been learning that the teachers, well, firstly, don't mind if the kids aren't talking for a day, which is not surprising. But secondly, really like the fact that the kids have to empathize for other children who are not connected. So much fundraising in schools, for better or worse, is about fundraising for yourself, for your own facilities. But to do it for someone who's not even remotely connected to you, I think it's quite special.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I love Day Without Speech. I've done my own Day Without Speech. It was great to be involved in something bigger than myself, but it was horrible being left without this method of communication.
Yeah.
Right. That method of communication. And I know you had challenged me to even give up my ability to type. And I'm like, oh, I'm just not doing that. It's like, if I can't. But that brings us to the question, how did you find out that speech therapy was needed in Cambodia? Like, how did you even see the need?
So that's the interesting part of the story for me, because it was so obvious. It wasn't, and I certainly can't claim to be the first person to notice it. In fact, when I got there in 2012, it was something I just heard over and over and over again. And Cambodia, historically, I'm not sure about the current statistics because we are talking 11 years on, was one of the most charity dense. I was going to say charity infested. That's probably not the right word. Charity dense.
That's a nicer word. We can call a picture. We can create a picture with that. Great.
Yeah.
Off we go. Yep.
Charity dense countries in the world. I think it had the second highest number of NGOs at one point, and it also had the second highest number of UN agencies behind Rwanda, I believe. And so there's all of this money and all this activity, and the country certainly needs a lot of help. But it struck me as really surprising, I guess, that there was something that affected over 500,000 people, but no one was doing anything about it. And so, like you said, it took, I guess, someone young and stupid enough to want to take it on. But it wasn't that the need was hard to find. It was really, really obvious.
Yeah, the hard bit though, Weh, is going, I want to do something meaningful about this. So we've all heard of fly in, fly out, or FIFO, as we Australians like to shorten everything.
Yep.
And we know that FIFO goes in and out of some of these countries like Cambodia quite a lot. What was different about OIC, and in terms of your leadership of this project, what made you go, we want to be more than a FIFO operation?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd seen so much in the charity sector about this cycle of dependency. And I call it the hamster wheel of charity work. So it's basically this idea that we get funding, we do the work, and then we request more. We justify why we should have more funding, and we keep that cycle going. And with charities, the fact that they are focused on growth, that's in and of itself tells you that there is a whole system to maintain. But one of the things I actually learned from physio, and believe it or not, there are some things I did actually learn. And one of them was about ethics. And it was really about this idea that ethical physiotherapists break the business model. That's the gist of it. So there is a difference between addressing someone's symptoms. Let's say if they come in with back pain and I take that pain away, as compared to solving the underlying problem. And that is potentially through exercise and advice and more long-term solutions, which means that that patient or client doesn't come back eventually. And it struck me as interesting that charities didn't have that mindset, because it's the same kind of idea that, yes, it is potentially bad for business if charities are going to stop at some point in the future, but it's obviously the right thing to do in terms of empowering countries like Cambodia. And so with this issue in Cambodia, I was very keen on setting up what I call now a redundant charity.
Right.
Redundant charity is the idea that a charity in advance will say, I'm going to finish our work here in Cambodia by this date, and our date for Cambodia is 2030.
Mm-hmm. So you actually went into this creation of this enterprise, which paid you some monies to support yourself, with the goal of becoming redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what will that mean for the nation of Cambodia? So so redundant doesn't just mean you're pulling, OIC is pulling out and the service no longer exists. What does it mean, Weh? Because this is so powerful.
It means they take it on for themselves. I think that's the most important thing. It means that they're the ones who are in charge. And it means that when we leave, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Charities at some point do have to stop. There's no such thing as a charity that's going to keep on going for all eternity. Everyone knows that. And the research shows that the key reasons why they leave countries like Cambodia are either because of a breakdown in relationship between the host government and the donor government, or because money runs out. Now, neither of these reasons are intentional reasons where this initiative has said, you know what, we're going to exit when we feel like you're empowered. These are just accidental reasons. So my whole thinking is then, well, why don't we set it up so that it's intentional, so that we're the ones who are in charge of when that time is. And that means that you, as in Cambodia in this example, are empowered to do it for yourself. And you're not relying on me, and you're not relying on Western donors. And you're the ones in charge.
And that was the part of OIC and your project and us getting to know each other. Was I was fascinated by this and loved this sense of empowerment, being able to help a nation understand that in this case, young children don't have a way of being able to communicate, I love you to mum, or I love you to dad. That brought me to tears. It's like, if my son hadn't been able to verbally express to me that he loved me, that would have been so difficult.
Yep.
But we've got this whole nation that didn't even know that there was a solution.
Yeah, that's right.
And so you go there and you go, we've got all these kids and older children because when they can't speak, they can't get educated. When they can't get educated, we know they're not going to be able to work. And the cycle of poverty just continues as generation after generation after generation. So no wonder we have NGO capital of the world turning up in Cambodia.
Yeah.
But you were committed to breaking that cycle.
That's right.
By becoming redundant.
Yeah. And it's not an original idea. It's not an original idea in any sense in the charity world or even, outside. And there are charities all over who do say, oh, we're working ourselves out of a job. And then you ask them the question, okay, tell me how, what's the plan and when it's going to happen? And then there'll be some vague response of some kind. But we all know that, in life, the most important thing to do when you're doing something, one of the most important things to do is to start with the end in mind. You don't just buy a gym membership and off you go. You go, okay, my goal is to lose X amount of kilos or to run a half marathon or whatever. And that's what success looks like. But for some reason, I think in the charity world, and I believe it's because it's a wholly emotional experience helping people, that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that there needs to be, calculated and potentially cold and rational decisions about how we actually do this helping. And we need to activate that part of our brains too. And then that's when we come up with something that's really meaningful.
Powerful. So Weh, it's not unlike health professionals in private practice, because if we don't have clients or patients to treat, we don't earn an income. And I know that this conversation comes up a lot when I'm working with health professionals, and they go, I feel so awful asking to be paid because I'm making money off people's pain, like emotional pain, physical pain, mobility pain. So to me, it's such an interesting parallel. It's like, are we secure enough as health professionals to go, there will be a day when you don't need me. And I am working towards that day, knowing full well that we've got other work to do to replace that income. So it's a very, very, very similar process, isn't it? The hamster wheel.
It is the hamster wheel. And I think, it was interesting, I think with your book to the Entrepreneurial Clinician, one of the things that I learned, I guess, was that it isn't within the mindset, I guess, of the typical allied health professional in the way that we're taught to ask these questions and to think about things these ways. in this way, sorry. But it doesn't do us any service. I think that's probably the gist of it. And taking this idea of redundant charities and taking it into private practice, thinking about the end in mind, if that's all it really is, what's going to happen after a certain time, and how we're going to get to that point, and then how we're going to ensure continuity. I think that's, already a big part of the journey. One of the things I hear quite a lot in private practice, I guess, and in allied health, is this idea of growth, and startups as well, this idea of growth. And with charities, there's also this idea of growth. Charities talk about the fact that, we raised 100 million this year compared to 80 million last year. To me, this isn't necessarily a sign of success. To me, a charity should be saying, we actually don't need to raise more, and we don't want your money, because we're getting closer to our goal of achieving whatever it is we're trying to achieve. And the parallel, I guess, with the private practice is that I feel like a lot of people want growth, but they don't really know why they do. And they don't really know what the trade-offs are. So to bring it into what I've been working on for the last 5 years with Umbo, we have grown, and some might say rapidly, I would say sustainably. And we haven't taken exponential growth, which I'm very glad of the fact that we haven't. And one of the key benefits of not doing that is we can sleep at night. Our stress levels are a lot lower than they would be if we'd taken on huge amounts of investment and more risk, I guess. So in that journey of growth, I think it's really important to ask yourself, why am I doing it?
Yeah. Why am I growing? And you're right, there are trade-offs. There are a lot of trade-offs for growth. And sometimes growth, we have so much KPI mentality around the dollar value, whereas that's really just a tool.
Yeah.
It's not really indicative of the outcomes that we're achieving at all.
And it's only one, sorry to interrupt, it's only one measure, right? Yeah. So for me, when the question's asked, are we growing at the right pace? So yes, financials are a big part of it. This is now talking about Umbo, which is a for-profit, by the way, not a charity. Are we growing at the right pace? Are the financials indicating that? Are the clinical measures and impact successful still? Are the social impact measures successful still? Are we getting good feedback still? And the last one is really important, is our internal engagement in terms of culture going up or maintaining the same? Because of course, if people grow too fast, culture tends to drop off. Yes. So that's the thing, is that when you're talking about growth on a financial scale, there are many other things that you have to sacrifice to achieve that. But if you can maintain, in this example, 5 domains all moving in the right direction, then I believe you're growing at the right speed.
That is, if anybody is looking at how to grow ethically, probably morally, I don't want to be the moral police here today, but in a way that allows us as health professionals to maintain our integrity, you need to go back and get the show notes for what Weh has just said, because they are going to be the 5 pillars of your business. And if you haven't got those things all growing at the same time, you're going to struggle. And I know that because I coach a lot of you, and these are one of the things that we're always working on. The culture piece is so important. But coming into Australia, so you came back home and you discovered this need. What was it like managing that transition back to Australia from Cambodia? Because that's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it was very hard. It was, putting my heart and soul into this work in Cambodia, and I guess not knowing how to manage my own relationship with my work, which is another theme, I'm sure, for your clients and people listening to the podcast. We all struggle with this at some point in our lives. That was very difficult, I think, coming back and having a sense of loss around all the things that I'd really been working on, and having to give it off, which was the right thing to do. So making sure that there were local Cambodian leaders that are running the charity, which is still running in Cambodia, but then not knowing what to do. And I guess part of the solution to that for me personally was discovering another need, which Umbo is filling. And that's the huge wait times that people are experiencing, mostly rural Australia, in terms of speech and occupational therapy.
Yeah, and they're extraordinarily huge. And again, we had the same FIFO, almost charity welfare like mentality, where we had all of these occupational therapists and speech pathologists flying in and out of rural communities. It's almost like they go in, they dump their goodness, and then they leave. And those like you and I, we go out there and we go, people can't generalize. They've got no support system set up. They've got no way of, they're completely dependent on you coming back again in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
And that's something I know you're fighting to remove those barriers.
Yeah, there are very good examples of big, shall not be named, but big institutions who go into rural communities and do screening for pediatric speech and OT, provide a report, and then disappear back to the city. And then the families are like, well, what do we do now? Okay, so now we've got a way to describe the issues that we already knew about for our child, but we don't have actually anyone to do the therapy. And I think this is like not only meaningless, but it's also borderline unethical to, you know, set people up with a certain expectation and then just, you know, take off. So I think what we do at Umbo is really important because we work with local communities to make sure we have some context of those people. And our therapists are not just all around Australia, but overseas. About 20% of our therapists are Australian trained, but based in different parts of the world, meaning that after hours, before hours, all very, very possible. And it's a beautiful way, I think, to provide services to rural Australia.
Okay, so this is really cool. So now we have this social enterprise, which is a for-profit. Okay, so and people are like, what does that mean? Is that an Australian term? It's a private practice, but its impact is social change, right? So not only have you found a problem that needs a fix, because we just can't keep saying to our people who live in rural and regional Australia, in 2 years' time, when your child is 8, you might be able to start services, or, oh, we didn't find out about this learning difficulty and your child's already in high school. By the time you get services, let's calculate that out. Oh, they'll be ready to take on an apprenticeship, which they have no hope of being able to fulfill, right? So then we're adding to a cycle of poverty here in Australia because kids, in this case, can't participate in education. So a way of helping us as a nation meet this need, you've gone overseas and you've gone, where are my Australian registered, skilled, capable OTs and speech pathologists who can work in Australia using telehealth?
That's the gist of it.
How cool is that?
Yeah, that's the gist of it. And it's also thinking about, well, we know, and everyone says, oh, there's a shortage of speech and occupational therapists. So then the question for us is, well, maybe there are some, maybe there's latent supply, maybe that they're just undiscovered. And what we found is that, yes, this batch of people who are living overseas is one example. And then, of course, the other one, which is very common, is mums of young children who want to do 10 to 15 hours working at home, but certainly can't be able to get into a clinic to do a full-time role along those lines. With Umbo, the other thing I'll just mention is that it's not just the fact that most of our clients are rural, which are 60% of our clients. And, you know, I think it's 11% of our clients, First Nations clients, and all sorts of other beautiful metrics about the types of people that we are providing services to. But also we have 50% of our profit goes into a social impact bank account. And then that money is used purely to subsidize services. So people who can't afford, maybe they're about to or trying to get onto NDIS, but have to pay privately for an assessment, we can subsidize those costs up to 100% for them.
Up to 100%.
Yeah, exactly. So people who otherwise would have missed out and fallen through the gaps. And it's a beautiful full circle way to impact people's lives, because this is quite a significant number of people. And of course, as the company grows, and so now we're talking about growth, but as I said, like in a meaningful way, I think as we grow, that 50% profit gets bigger. At the moment, we're giving away about $3,000 a month in free services. And that's because we're still quite young, but that figure could easily, you know, be much, much greater than that in the future.
Wow. Oh, okay. So my next question for you, Weh, is you've talked about redundancy and you've talked about your leadership becoming redundant. Like your goal was to hand the leadership of OIC over to a Cambodian-based team. Where are your redundancies for you personally in Umbo? What are you aiming for?
Yes. So talking about leadership, you know, and I've come from leading a very small charity in Cambodia, where it was sort of around 5 to 10 people sort of level. And then with Umbo, you know, back when it was 1 and 3 and then 5 and then 10, and now we're at 65. So we have so I've seen that full journey, of course, which some people are very fortunate to see. Now, what's been most interesting to me has been that I've had to adapt. to Umbo.
Mm.
And I think that is, if I could think of one leadership lesson of leading a startup, that's probably it, is your startup won't adapt to you. You better do the adapting yourself.
Wow.
And the people that are able to do that quicker and with
Mm.
less, throwing their hands up in the air and less fuss and just get on with it, they're probably the ones who are going to succeed the most. But we're certainly at a stage now where I'm the relevant person in the role at the moment. And there might come a time in the future where Umbo potentially is too big, or maybe isn't changing enough to suit my skill set, because I'm all about change and growth and thinking about how to solve problems as they progress. And maybe Umbo will become so stable that I'll get bored too. That's very possible as well. So I think being open-minded about that is really important. And I've openly said to our board as well, if there's a better person to do it, I'm more than happy to step aside.
It takes an incredible amount of security in yourself. An incredible amount. I think anybody who can stand up and say, if you can find somebody better, and not in a passive aggressive way, because I know you well enough to know you haven't weaponized that. You've kind of gone, if Umbo needs somebody else in this position right now, it's more important for Umbo to have the right skill set than it is for me to be in this chair.
Definitely.
Right. That's a hard thing for us to say you birthed this thing, you grew this thing. How do you think you have been able to become, I'm trying not to blow smoke here, Weh. What mindset do you have that enables you to go, if I'm not the right person for the job, help me step aside? What's that mindset?
Yeah, I think it's just thinking about things beyond yourself. It's really taking your ego out of it. And in my upcoming book, Joe, Redundant Charities, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon, that's a big part of it. So going back to the charity idea and social impact, which of course has been my whole area for the last 15 years, it is very hard to take your ego out of it, because when you're a founder and then you're involved in helping, and you're not exactly getting paid a lot, you're not exactly glamorized, you have to take something out of it. So having your ego stroked is actually a nice way of being paid, funnily enough, for the work that you do. But it is counterintuitive to making yourself redundant, for sure.
Yeah. So you've already brought up the book, which is great. I'm just going to jump down to that point on my page here.
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead for you.
No, I don't mind at all. How do you want this book to make an impact? What is it about this book that we need to read?
I think that the way in which we view helping has to change. I think that there has to be alternative views. And I will say this is only one viewpoint. And the way that we scrutinize what is a good cause has to change as well. And it's got to go beyond just feeling good about it. And we have to, as I said before, engage rational thinking. And so with Redundant Charities, it's really firstly highlighting why things are the way they are. What are the reasons why the structure of charities encourages dependency and encourages this hamster wheel? That's the first half of the book. And the second half is highlighting all those charities that have broken that model, including the one in Cambodia that I started, of course, but those that are setting themselves up to be redundant and really bucking the system and doing it in a way which I think shows a lot of integrity, because it's not what they're incentivized to do.
No. So what are the lessons that health professionals in private practice can expect to learn from reading a book about redundant charity?
So I think when people read the book, they'll see hopefully the argument about why charities are the way they are. And then they might get to the end of that section and feel a little bit depressed. But that's why I've structured it the way I have, because the second half is like, actually, you can do something about it. So I guess that's probably the message for people that are in a system like private practice and so on, and maybe NDIS, where it feels that it's immovable and they feel like they're just a little cog in the machinery and there's not much they can really do about it. There is always something you can do. There is an alternative. And so within the nonprofit sector and within aid and development, there is so much whinging about everything is terrible, and this is.
Oh, have you been in health? That's all. That's
true.
So good. We eat our young. We're like, you suck. It sucks. The system sucks. Everything sucks.
Right.
I'm going to go and learn how to. I'm going to become a yoga teacher instead, or something. Yeah,
that's right.
So
and I probably try and.
There.
Yeah, I probably exclude myself a little bit. You're much more involved in the sector, but I try and exclude myself a bit from my own mental health, probably. But there's complaining is valuable to a certain extent, but I guess the point is that there's always something you can do. Yeah. And so I found that really bizarre that in aid and development, everyone complained about donors and the time that it took to do reporting and the time that you're asking for money and this cycle of dependency. And then with these redundant charities, they've taken that and they've said, okay, enough complaining. Let's think about a different model. And then they've created something really amazing.
Yeah, that's really powerful. So you've been working on this book for a while now, Weh. Am I allowed to ask the very uncomfortable question, when can I get a copy?
You can ask. You can get a copy by September.
Yay!
Yeah, so it's all happening at the moment. So yes, and thanks to your advice as well, Joe, for getting it up and running. But yes, it's been going for 2.5 years, which actually now I'm understanding is not that slow, not that long, sorry. But I'm interested to see what people think about it. If it is of interest to people, that's great. If it's not, that's also fine. Because for me personally, learning about these charities and writing this book and going through the process and me feeling inspired by their journey, that's been enough already.
Wow. Oh, now I want to read the book just for that. Fantastic. So Weh, you said yes to being a part of the 2023 Future Proofing Health Professional Symposium. Thank you. What can we expect to learn from you during your symposium presentation or interview? I think I'm interviewing you, aren't I? Yes.
I think so. Yes.
Yes, I am.
I think if people would get to know me and what I'm about, they'd probably, one of the things that they would say is I'm not run of the mill. So I'm not a standard physio. I'm not a standard, CEO or a charity founder. And I think that's something that I have to really thank my parents for. They really encouraged us to challenge the status quo, which I will say is culturally actually quite unusual in some senses.
I didn't want to bring that up, but because, this face, white, middle-aged,
my okay.
socioeconomic status, I kind of went, ooh, I don't think I can say that.
Yeah, I can say it. It's cool. Yeah, I mean, in Eastern culture, obviously, it's a lot about conforming and a lot about collectivism and fitting in with the group. So my parents, for whatever reason, were not like that and are not like that. So they always challenge us to think differently. And I think looking at problems that exist within the healthcare sector, there are ways in which professionals are able to think differently. But hopefully they'll get a little bit of encouragement that despite the difficulties in choosing that path, there is always an outcome that's worth it. And, swimming against the stream, like it's never fun. It's never enjoyable when you're in it. But sometimes when you just take a step back and look at what you've been able to achieve and the lessons that you've learned and the people that you've become friends with along the way who are similar minded, then you start to realize it's worth it. So I hope that people feel encouraged by that journey and want to apply it to their own areas of work.
Yeah, I know that people who come to your session will be inspired, and there is this incredible gift you have, Weh, to help normalize those of us who aren't typical. Who you do that graciously, and you do it without even trying to. It's just like, Weh expresses that so well. I know there are many a times when I've spent time with you and I've gone, that's an excellent Weh-ism.
Should start charging for them, get some royalties.
Possibly. There we go. Nicely done there, Weh, by the way. Oh God, we can have so much fun playing. If you have not seen Weh's Instagram handle, you need to go find that. We'll put it in the show notes. That is hilarious, which is great because it's all about comedy. Yeah. All right. How can people find you apart from Instagram? How else can people find you?
Pretty much every platform, Joe, unfortunately. I might not be that active these days because I'm trying not to, but even on Threads, I'm not sure. Are you on Threads? I'm not sure because it's like literally a week old.
I am on Threads, but I'm kind of watching what's happening. I'm actually enjoying it, to be honest, because it's all about conversation, but I can spend a lot of time there. I have to be careful.
Definitely. So, okay. So the first one is my website. So it's my name, wehyeoh.com, WEHYEOH.com. And then also redundantcharities.com. Will be live by the time the podcast is up. Umbo, umbo.com.au. I'll just keep on listing URLs. OIC Australia, OIC Cambodia.org. They're both charities that I've been involved with starting. And then all the usual social media platforms, except TikTok, too old for that.
Yeah, I'm way too old for TikTok. I'm too judgy McJudgy. Weh also has a fantastic TEDx talk that he did a couple of years ago now. That is very, very, very good. So we're going to find it and we'll put that in the show notes as well. So Weh, it's been ages since you and I caught up for our actual real life coffee. Yes. I can't remember. If we were going to a cafe and I was going to get you a coffee, what would you be ordering?
Oh, I'm oat milk at the moment's the go, I think. It's the
of course
it's tasty, but it's also but it's also the most sustainable one, I think, in terms of like resources. Yeah, but you'd be very proud of me, Joe, because I recently grew up and got my own coffee machine at home after using AeroPresses and French presses and just kind of like delaying and delaying and delaying. So I feel like a real grown up human being now. I'm like tamping my coffee and, doing all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but no, it'll be an oat-based something.
Oat-based something. So I might an oat-based piccolo, because I haven't had anyone on the podcast yet ask for a piccolo.
Yeah,
so
sure. I'll take that.
Yeah, you'll take that. Excellent. Weh, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your thoughtfulness with this podcast today, and help us become more informed about how we can actually challenge the status quo. There's always a way to do something different, and that every single one of us have a role to play in making change. So thank you so much for that. And I look forward to interviewing you again for the symposium. Hey, Joe Muirhead here again. Thank you for watching this episode of the Entrepreneurial Clinician. It has been great to share guests, new information, and new ways of thinking with you. I trust that this episode today has inspired you and has helped you to reconnect to your sense of purpose as a health professional and a clinician. Before we move on, just want to remind you that these sessions, these episodes, are provided for educational purposes only. Nothing in these episodes is designed to be treatment specific or a specific recommendation about your health, your wellness, or your finances for your situation specifically. If you need assistance in any of these areas, please reach out to an appropriate professional for you to be able to access the help that you need. If you have enjoyed these episodes and would like to see more, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and make sure you leave me a comment below. And I look forward to bringing you more great, inspiring stories where I get to learn just as much as you do. Until next time, go be your awesome self.